Okay, and so there is no latitude there. There's no flexibility. We have to put up $2.7 billion in match.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes,
and that was articulated in a letter from the Undersecretary of Transportation, John Pocari, back in January.
And this is for the Central Valley $6 billion part.
Right, and that letter referred both to the ARA funding and the FY10.
Well, you mentioned before that you don't have a couple of things, that you don't have any problem sleeping at night because of the funding. I have a great deal of problems sleeping at night because of the funding, because it's my responsibility to have to be fiscally responsible and vote on something for the best interests of the people of California. So I'm not saying it's not appropriate. I'm just saying I have a lot of concerns because I want this project to move forward, but I am deeply concerned that there is no other commitment, and we're out there with a $6 billion project that may or may not even reach Bakersfield now that we've been told. It may only get to Hanford. And besides that, even if it does get to Bakersfield, there's a big gap that's still there. And you say, well, we didn't have the money when we did BART, but BART, there were two things, and the same thing with the Federal Highway project. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least BART, they were ongoing, maybe not every year, but there were transit money in the highway, in our federal transportation monies. That was an ongoing kind of thing. Whether it was always there or not, it was competitive. There was a revenue stream. The same thing with the excise tax on gasoline was a revenue stream for highways. There is no dedicated federal revenue stream for high-speed rail. That's it. So we're always going with a cup in our hand. Right now, no commitments to pick up what we need or to fill this gap, which, if we don't get it, we're stuck.
Well, may I comment on this?
Yeah.
Let me make 3 points here. First of all, it's your last point, Senator, that I would respectfully disagree with when you say we're stuck, because this goes back to the question of what are we exactly stuck with. And I think you heard commentary from the peer review group that in their pending report, they're going to address the question of what they consider to be the worst case situation.
Right.
So let's stare into the maw of the worst case. So the administration's request is that you allow us to access $2.7 billion worth of the body of the bond money, and also that you appropriate, as you must, the federal share. So that's $2.7 billion. That carries a debt service on it, and we probably would not be using the whole $2.7 billion in this first year. We certainly would not. So it has whatever debt service level that it's got. We've already heard, and Senator DeSonia has asked the ledge analysts to verify that the special funds that the administration sees as the repayment mechanism, given the terrible challenges you have in the general fund, are there. And then the question that's legitimately asked and needs to be addressed is about the sufficiency of those funds. What you'd be left with, and by the way, excuse me, the administration's request also is for the appropriation and accessing the bond funds for $720 million of the connectivity dollars that were also in Proposition 1A. In addition to that, we have indicated to you that in the future we would be coming forth and seeking additional bond fund access to effectuate these memoranda of understanding that we've signed in Northern and Southern California. So what we're looking at right now for those dollars is the acquisition of right-of-way that doesn't exist today in the fastest growing part of the state in the Central Valley. And that right-of-way will have a value of hundreds of millions of dollars and will be harder and harder to achieve in the future. We are looking for the construction of the spinal segment of America's first true high-speed rail system, but in the meantime, something that has immediate and dramatic benefits by the mixed use with the existing popular San Joaquin service, taking at least an hour, perhaps an hour and 15 minutes off the transit time up and down the Central Valley between Bakersfield and Sacramento and into Oakland, and with further investments that strengthen and improve the efficiency, the safety, and the reliability of the existing rail networks there, and that with the $720 million of connectivity funds absolutely essential projects in the south and the north, projects like the interregional connector, which is the #1 priority of LAMTA, projects like the improvement to the Los Angeles to San Diego line south of Anaheim, which is America's second most traveled Amtrak service, as you know, and the leading towards the step of the electrification of Caltrain, and money for VTA, and money for ACE, and money for BART, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say that's what we're stuck with, Senator, I have to differ. That is what we get.
Well,
we don't get a high-speed rail system, but we get a lot.
But we don't get to fill the gap. All I know is Mr. Chalker said here, also on the peer review committee, that if they were doing things that he would have started not in the Central Valley, he would have started down in the blended approach down in the, that's where they would have started to use their money. That's really what he said. I've heard you say that also. If it was ideal, I now have to fiscally wonder why we have started in, is this purely a political decision why we have started in the Central Valley rather than at the ends, when in fact we get something that we can use. The more we start from the LA Anaheim and work out, or from San Jose, San Francisco, we start there. If we could have started there, that if we had the flexibility to start there,
but Senator,
we would not be in such a bad, because we would have had something that we could have used now. Right now, we have no guarantees we're ever going to fill, and even though you don't worry about it, that we're ever going to fill that gap. I worry about it.
Well, if I might just clarify what my nocturnal turmoil is about.
Too much information.
Yes, we really. No one in this room wants to know about your nocturnal turmoil.
Wait a second. As long as I'm not getting my question answered, I would.
Well, I'd like to answer your question. No, what I meant when I said that I don't lie awake worrying about the funding is, what I mean by that is that I believe that the funding over time will come, and we will be able to close that rail gap. Now, why do I believe that? Because I think we're not that far away in the scheme of things, and because I think we have a heck of a good argument and an argument of clarity. Senator, the problem is that if we had started putting all the money into the bookends, and I know that that probably would be the preference of some folks here, number one, we'd be spending the next 2 or 3 hours talking about how we could even do that under the provisions of Prop 1A. And I mean, it's just, that money has to be matched, that money has to be building an electrified system that can go 200 miles an hour.
You don't have the demand.
And that shows...
Well, maybe we'd have had the federal government as our partner instead of our landlord.
We would have still never met the Prop 1A criteria, Senator. I mean, I just have to say that. We would have never met them. What allows us to make those investments now is that they're part of a true intercity high-speed rail system, and that brings them within the ambit of Prop 1A criteria. But if you just disconnected them and put them down there by themselves, I think you'd have a heck of a time making the legal argument. And that is why when I came onto this board as a Northern Californian and a person who thought, well, these guys were clearly idiots making these decisions, which is what you tend to think when you join an organization. And that, you know, you look through it, and then you know, and I had the conversations with the federal government, can you move the money? I had the conversations around, I looked at the law, and I believe that we've got a balanced program now that makes, we're talking about $3.5 billion of investments in the bookends. That's a lot of money. At the same time, we're grabbing a right-of-way that is going to be harder and harder and harder to get in the Central Valley, and pointing an arrow right at the gap that needs to be bridged from Bakersfield to Palmdale, which we didn't have enough money to do as a standalone project. We just didn't. It's an $11 billion project that we didn't have that money. But we've got a running start now, and I think that we can focus our attention and the federal government's attention on that critical rail gap, and I believe we'll be successful.
Well, I hope so.
And, as Mr. Kempton said, when we get beyond there to an initial operating segment, each step of the way that we take, when we close the gap and then further from Palmdale down to San Fernando Valley, has a dramatic increase in the utility and value of this for the people of California.
Absolutely.
And that's why we need to keep driving in that direction.
Yeah. Good.